Welcome, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started in just a minute. Thank you guys for being here and participating. Today's session is celebrating college completion comebacks, proven strategies for supporting adult learners. So we'll get started in just another minute. A few housekeeping things. Everyone is automatically muted, so we cannot hear you, but feel free to introduce yourself and where you're from in the chat pod.
Okay, so are we ready to get started?
Yeah, we can go ahead.
Okay,
Thank you
wonderful.
all.
Thank you. So if you please advance, Kelly. Again, thank you so much, Katrina, for those tips and for getting us started and for the technical support earlier. Um, Welcome to all those joining us. You're welcome to use the chat, post who you are, where you're from, and if you have any questions. We have a couple people who'll be monitoring the chat and replying to you. You can see our title here. Katrina's already mentioned it. And with me today, I have two other presenters. If you'd please advance. I'm Stacy Stone. I'm the Vice Provost of Academic Affairs at Jacksonville State University. And with me today are Kelly Leon, who's the Vice President of Communications and Government Affairs at the Institute for Higher Education Policy, which is in Washington, D.C., and Kelly Martin, who's also with Jacksonville State. She's our Director of Enrollment Initiatives and Transfer Pathways. Today, we have a few goals that you'll see on this next slide. And as you look over those, I just want to mention again that we do plan to have a part of this presentation that is more interactive. And so as we present today, I encourage you to think about your own institution, what's working well, what gaps you might have, what strategies you could benefit from as you really think about how to recruit and support post-traditional students. I want to give you a little bit of information about Jacksonville State University as context for the program we're going to highlight and the student who's the subject of the film that we will show you in just a moment. So Kelly, if you'd please advance so they can see some information about Jack State is our new brand. And we are a regional public institution in Alabama, not Florida. And as you can see, we have about 11% of our undergraduate students are post-traditional, and that's out of a group of around 8,600 undergrad, and we're almost to 10,000 in enrollment. We're trying to get there. And the majority of our students are on federal aid. And the next slide, we have a little bit of information about kind of the economic context for our region. And Jack State is in Region 2 on this image. And the data that you have here is from a census in 2019. So a little bit out of date, but you have to use what you have. And I think we'll probably come back to that point later when we talk about some data. But now I want to hand this off to Kelly Leon, who's going to introduce the film and screen this short film for you.
Thanks very much, Dr. Stone. Thanks so much to all of you for joining us today. I am with the Institute for Higher Education Policy. We are deeply concerned with strategies to support expanded college access and success. And as a part of that success component is a focus on students who have started their college journeys, but stopped out for whatever reason. Life may have gotten in the way. And we at IHAP undertook a 3-year project called Degrees When Due between 2018 and 2021, in which we worked with 200 institutions around the country in about 20 different states to help those institutions build the capacity to help their students re-engage on their post-secondary journey. We call this set of strategies degree reclamation. And as an outgrowth of that, we wanted to highlight some of the students and some of the institutions that were part of that Degrees When Due initiative. Jack State was one of those institutions we were very pleased to work with at that time. And Bonnie, the student at Jacksonville State University, is whom you will meet in the film you'll see in just a moment. We were very pleased that over the course of 3 years, we were able to help those institutions award over 10,000 credentials to students who were previously had not earned those, and many, many more were on the path to be awarded when the initiative concluded in 2021. Moving forward my slide here, just a moment. Okay, so with that, let's go ahead and meet Bonnie.
So when I moved here sight unseen. What a surprise when we pulled up to see those mountains.
Good morning, Laura. How are you?
So I graduated high school in 1991, and I was actually living with a foster family. When I graduated high school, I was a governor's diploma, had great grades, had been able to maintain a life, even though I had been on my own for so long. And they provided me an opportunity in my senior year to see what was available and what was out there. And so I put my application in and I went to Jacksonville State. Had never been outside of Maryland and Virginia, really. And I started school, loved it, had this big passion to be the first person in my family to graduate college. And it was tough. Financially, I had no support. But I had a dedication, and I got a job and worked and went to school. And my first, I'd say 3 semesters were great. My 4th semester, I had some pretty significant tragedies in my family, and I didn't do so well. So I stopped out.
Stopping out is when a student begins a course of study, a certificate, an associate's degree, or a bachelor's degree program, and then needs to pause those studies before completing their credential. The vast majority of students begin college with every intention of completing, with every intention of graduating. And yet America is home to more than 40 million adults with some college and no credential.
I was able to move back home, and my grandmother helped me go to nursing school. It was a community college that accepted 12 high school students, 12 adult students, vocational program, and I did a 1-year program and took my tests, and I became an LPN. I've worked in the industry of people with developmental delays. I had an opportunity to become a dementia program director on this campus, and I accepted a position. And I've been doing it ever since. I love dementia care. It's been absolutely amazing. I was awarded National Nurse of the Year in 2015. And since that time, my career has really just exploded.
So Bonnie is a joy to work with. She's a very talented nurse. She is good with her employees, very empathetic manager. She listens well. The families love her. She just really is an exceptional employee, one of the best I've worked with in my 37 years. And a couple years ago, probably longer than that, it's hard to keep track, I sat down with her and talked about the fact that for her to advance in our field in healthcare, she needed to have a credential that she didn't have yet.
I have a friend that I had met when I was at Jacksonville State in the beginning, and she had also stopped out and had told me that she had found an opportunity to finish what she started, that there was a program that Jacksonville State had. She explained it to me that they allow credits to be maintained that you took on the campus, and that could be an opportunity for me.
Finish What You Started is an initiative that Jacksonville State launched in 2020, and it was a way for us to reach out to former students at JSU that had stopped attending before completing a bachelor's degree. So these are students that they had some financial investment, they had some time invested in getting a college degree, but for one reason or another, they had to stop before getting that credential. So Finish What You Started really had 3 components that we felt was important when reaching out to these students. So one is a scholarship. That's everybody's favorite part, is we offer a scholarship in the first semester of re-enrollment. So when students register for 6 credit hours, they get 3 of those for free. The second really important component is personalized academic advising. So when we first reached out to these students, we sent them a postcard, and on that postcard was the name of a real person, the phone number of a real person, so that we weren't sending them to a general inquiry form. And the third component of Finish What You Started is they had the option of pursuing our most flexible academic program, which is our Integrated Studies degree.
Degrees When Due is a nationwide college completion initiative led by the Institute for Higher Education Policy, or IHEP. At Bonnie's institution, it's called Finish What You Started, and it's an initiative to bring back to campus students who have stopped out of college before finishing their credential and providing those students with the supports they need to get across the degree completion finish line.
Having my bachelor's degree provides an opportunity for me to have a nursing home administrator's license, go through an administrator in training program, which is a 6-month program, but you can't even apply to do that unless you have a bachelor's degree.
I first met Bonnie July of 2019 with an email that she sent wanting to finish her college degree. And looking at Bonnie's transcript, I saw that she had a great deal of classes that could count toward the Integrated Studies program. With that program, you're able to use a different assortment of classes that can be used to complete the degree program. Integrated Studies has an option. You can either do it online or in the classroom. And for Bonnie, being that she was an out-of-state student, she was able to complete her program online. When Bonnie told me she had 26 years of work experience, we immediately knew she could utilize her work experience credit for credit here at Jacksonville State University.
Bonnie's institution implemented many of the promising practices that we uncovered through the Degrees When Due initiative. Her institution paired her with an advisor who could give her one-on-one personal supports and advising to help her navigate the process. Her institution also provided her with in-state tuition for online programming and provided her with credit for experiential learning, meaning that the work that she had done as a nurse applied towards her ultimate credential. Her institution thought of these various pieces of the puzzle in order to create a smooth experience for her to ultimately earn that bachelor's degree that she worked so hard for.
So one of the things that I can say is that this journey really has been one of the most amazing things I've experienced. And just finishing what I started and the opportunities that are coming for me as a result of that, however I choose to use them, is really powerful to me. And if I, at the age of 50, can walk across the stage, I encourage anybody, because age is just a number. What you want to do for yourself is the most important thing. And the education behind it is what gets you there.
Bonnie did an incredible amount of hard work in order to complete her bachelor's degree. And she was supported by her institution and by her state, all of whom recognized the importance of providing Bonnie with the opportunities and supports that she needed to complete this bachelor's degree. It's a shared responsibility between students, between states and institutions, and the federal government to make post-secondary opportunity a reality for more people, regardless of race, background, or circumstance.
We're not going to look at it once more. We're going to move on to the next slide. Just give me a moment. Sorry about that. I hope everyone enjoyed learning about Bonnie's experience, learning more about Finish What You Started at Jack State, and learning more about how IHEP has invested into this work at our organization. We, alongside the film, and Bonnie's film is one of 3 films that we have created as part of this series. We also created a viewing guide to help institutions and practitioners like yourselves implement the strategies that you heard articulated in this short film, so that in your own campus and in your own context, you can think through what kinds of decisions and apparatuses need to be created to help your students return to campus. There are several different strategies that we have outlined and things that we learned at IHEP through working through with those 200 institutions that we have learned have been helpful in setting up strong degree reclamation and other programs to help students who have stopped out. I'm going to briefly describe 6 of those strategies that are outlined within the degree reclamation work that IHEP has put together. We've developed a handbook to that goes into the details on each of these a bit more, but I'll give a brief overview of them. And then I'll hand it over to my Jack State colleagues to draw some connections between our strategies and the CALE Allies framework that all of you may be familiar with. So the first thing to do when thinking about putting together a system to help re-engage students who have stopped out is just establishing a team with your institution. There are different departments, divergent parts of the institution that may need to come together to think critically about how all of the processes, procedures, and policies can be situated in a way to help students, especially students who may not have been engaged on the campus for some time. The other is to think about this from an equity mindset. And by equity, I simply mean creating a strategy that helps every single student who may engage be successful. So that's all that means, building an equity framework. The other is taking a hard look at the institutional policies and practices that are currently in place, and maybe some things that might be outdated or may need to evolve to support and set up these students who have been off of campus for some time be successful. The next is really digging into data. And that means looking at the students who were previously enrolled, understanding how many perhaps just shy of earning a credential, maybe that's 3, 6, or 9 credits away, and really finding out who those individuals are and the best way to re-engage them. The other is next, you want to think about a process for data collection and sharing. And this can get a bit technical in nature, but it's an important one. Think about what it would take to transfer credits from one institution to the other and provide information across different campus departments in ways that include the student's consent. So this is something that's a bit technical, but quite important when thinking about these strategies to support students and their pathway back to campus. And then the other is to target your communication to those near completers. Who are those people who are probably the highest likely to re-engage with you because they're just a few credits away or very, very close to earning that credential? So think about the strategies that would be most effective in reaching those students. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to my Jack State colleagues to share a little bit more about the CALE Allies framework and parallels that could help your institution and your own thinking.
All right, thank you, Kelly. So, as she mentioned, we wanted to be able to give you not only the actionable checklist of things that your institution can consider when looking at degree reclamation efforts, but also some insight as to what that looked like on our end in checking those boxes as we were preparing to not only launch the Finish What You Started program, but also continue to work towards being a more adult-friendly institution, which is where the KALE Allies framework comes in. So if you're not as familiar with this framework, this was developed by KALE to help institutions be really adult-forward and adult-ready for enrollment. So what we've done, and Kelly, you can advance to the next slide, is place these reclamation strategies in each of the levels in the framework. So the ones that are in bold here are the ones that Kelly has already mentioned. So at level 1, you're really looking at data and figuring out, getting your head around who this population is at your institution. And we filled in the gaps here to help better meet the framework in terms of the strategic planning and the culture of change and adaptivity. So the first step, I think, in looking at an adult and equity-focused strategic plan is just figuring out how adults, or if they are reflected in your strategic plan or in your departmental goals. And if not, then definitely that would be a place to start in developing plans for them based on the data that you find when you're really digging into that. And then unless you just come from an institution that is naturally adaptable and friendly with change, a good first point to work towards that from us is to always, as Kelly mentioned, center equity in your conversations. And I think really communicate the why of if you're asking for a policy change or if you're asking for something that's going to require someone to kind of revolutionize their policies and practices. Centering the why in those conversations is going to be really important. So on the next slide, you'll see sort of what that looked like at JSU. As we were digging into our data, we utilized both internal and external data. Some of that was what Dr. Stone covered previously from our workforce region, but also internally, we had to figure out how many students we're talking about, what sort of holds they had, what sort of barriers were they going to face when they came back, how much of a balance did they owe on average, how close were they, what programs were they in, all of those things we had to gather. For us, that came from IT, so that would be the other thing to consider is who is the best place. Would it be your institutional research office or your IT department? The other data point that we were considering in looking at all of this, of course, is the demographic cliff. And as our institutional plans are to grow enrollment, we know that we will have to be very adult ready because we will be looking at that group as being a large driver of enrollment in the future. With the culture of change and adaptivity, I really do think one thing that we've been able to implement at Jack State, especially since the beginning of the Finish What You Started program, is a real culture around making sure the adult student profile is brought to every conversation about potential changes or conversations about an admissions requirement or whether a program should be online or in person. Over the years, we've definitely become a lot better at that. We do have an enrollment management committee that is appointed by the president. In that committee, we have an undergraduate subcommittee, a graduate subcommittee, and a post-traditional subcommittee, which is made up of people from all over campus who bring various perspectives on post-traditional enrollment. And so that is something I feel like we've done well over the years. Our major challenge at this level was just figuring out the data. Over time, we started to learn, okay, we probably need to exclude this population that had some disciplinary issues when they were here. Or one issue that we ran into was even though we were encouraging the integrated studies program as the point of re-enrollment, some students that were in some of our programs like nursing and education that aren't as easily able to re-enroll after you've stopped. Some students misinterpreted that as an invitation to come back to our nursing program, so we kind of had to tweak who we were communicating with and how we were communicating with them along the way. And I will say, in terms of challenges, I'm on the enrollment side. Dr. Stone is on the academic side. So she can talk a little bit more about some things that they faced when it came down to degree audits, the academic perspective on things that they did at this level.
All right. So when Finish What You Started began, we did not have the software needed to run degree audits. So we were manually doing this, our certification officers. And really where the idea for this program, where it came from, was a certification officer who realized, I think a student had reached out to her wanting to come back. And we realized that there was this whole group of students out there, and we were having to manually do degree audits on students who were inactive in order to put together that target population for our messaging. It was very worthwhile work, but a lot of work. But now we do have some systems that help with that.
My mouse disappeared, I'm sorry. So moving on to level 2, as Kelly mentioned, establishing your team is very important. So from our perspective, this is not only our champions of adult learners and our folks that are working with them most closely, but that could also be the people who are overseeing policies that you may be working to change. Definitely bringing those people in, giving them a seat at the table as early as possible will be helpful. In terms of the KEL framework, one of the elements of level 2 is the faculty and staff professional development. So first figuring out what opportunities does your institution provide for faculty and staff to get professional development in this space, and what knowledge gaps might they have. And then number 3, the institutional policies and practices. If you work closely with this population, with adult learners or with returning students, you probably know which ones are the most problematic right off the top of your head. But it could also be helpful to identify some of the policies that could be helpful for them, or things that you could leverage to help with re-enrollment. So on the next slide, we have more details about what we did at this level. For our institutional team, I would say the team members that had the most visibility was enrollment management and what was at the time the School of Arts and Humanities, I believe, Dr. Stone. We had a few
Yes.
name changes since then. So because we were doing the recruitment, they were providing the academic pathway and the advising, but there were other key players as well. We were definitely in constant communication with IT, getting this list down to exactly who we needed. Marketing was involved. Our scholarships office was involved. So we had a larger group than what kind of we typically think of when we think about starting this program. For professional development, the year after Finish What You Started launched is when we joined KALE. So we had a team of institutional members that were able to access the resources from KALE, which were very helpful along the way. And then being invited to participate in an initiative from our state called Re-Engage Alabama, which was a quarterly convening of institutions solely focused on the some college, no degree population. And for a lot of us, that was our own former students that we were focused on. So getting to learn from institutions that were peer institutions or that may have a similar enrollment, similar institutional profile was very helpful. We did, after identifying those policies that were problematic, and this is a major challenge at this level, we are working towards developing more equitable scholarship and financial policies. I think we've made the most headway probably in terms of scholarship because, as mentioned in the video, we do have the scholarship for returning students and a couple of others now that are focused on adults. But the policy we're still working on is a policy to pay past due balances in full prior to re-enrolling. So that is something that I think with policy changes around transcript withholding, hopefully we'll have some more leverage to make some progress there on letting students, creating an on-ramp for them to get back in the door. And again, I'll let Dr. Stone talk about that.
I was just going to say, I'm so glad that this program worked for Bonnie, and the film makes it look like it's such a smooth, easy program when it was a lot of work to put together. And one of the challenges early on, and this has to do with communication across academic departments and colleges, is making sure that others were aware of the initiative, Before it was a major program, there were no scholarships at that point. But to make sure that everyone understood what we were about to do. So Integrated Studies is the interdisciplinary program, and it's housed over in the College of Arts and Humanities at the time. And when we had the idea to reach out to these stopped out post-traditional students, some of whom we could just award degrees if they came back in, re-enrolled, switched their major to integrated studies, they had met the degree requirements for that major, just not the major they were enrolled in when they stopped out. Granted, there were some students in that bucket, but having to sell this to deans and departments that seemed to be quite possessive of their students who were inactive was more of a challenge than I thought it should be. And at one point, we promised to send out messaging that said, you may re-enroll. This is what the path would be in integrated studies. Here's your contact if you want to re-enroll as your former major, in that former major. So that was the early messaging. And just until I would say my colleagues became more aware and familiar with this program, and then they understood that we weren't like stealing their inactive students. And what the program was really about was helping these students achieve that degree.
So I like to keep it real and make sure we communicate the not so pretty parts of launching a program like this. All right, so we're ready for level 3. And I think that level 3 of the student experience is really where we continue to shine. So it may not have all of our policies as perfect as we would want them, but Jacksonville State is known as the friendliest campus in the South, and we do take that very seriously for all of our students. And so the checklist here in terms of creating a good student experience, because this is where they're not really going to see all of the back end work that you've done and what it took to have these conversations and what it took to get a registrar or a student accounts or some sort of policy change, but they will know when they take that first action, whether they feel like you're ready for them, whether they feel like you want them back, or you're prepared for them to come back. So the first step here, and it's so important, is evaluating the true cost for an adult learner. So if you've been in a freshman admissions presentation before where they say, you know, here's the sticker price, but don't worry, nobody really pays this, right? Because you have your federal aid and you have your scholarship. Well, for our adult learners who don't have as much access to those institutional scholarships, that might be a more accurate cost for them. And especially those that may be returning with financial aid issues that they may need to work out over a couple of semesters, they may not be able to rely on some of those sources of funding. So making sure that you understand, what does our program actually cost? The second thing is, in terms of providing the front end support that's listed in the CAEL framework, is mapping the student journey. So if you think about a student that drives past your institution tonight and says, you know, I really need to go back and finish my degree, what does it look like for them when they go home and they go to your website? How do they find information that is relevant to them? How do they find a point of contact? What happens if they fill out an inquiry card or they apply? How long does it take for them to get connected to an advisor and to find out what happens, how many classes they have before and how long is left to graduation? They usually want to know that before they know anything. So that's a really important element of it. In terms of academic empowerment and the career relevance, a good place to start is identifying your institution's most adult-friendly majors. So for us, we've talked a lot about integrated studies. We also have an industrial leadership program that is fully online, which is almost exclusively adults in that program because they have to have some work experience to be in that program. We also have a STEP RN to BSN program, some of those, and making sure that adults understand when they're looking at that is who their peers would be. In most of those programs, they would be with other adults. As Dr. Stone mentioned, as far as providing options to students, so we also know we want to be transparent in the advising process. So even though integrated studies might get you out in 2 semesters, if you want to be an accountant, maybe you should stick with accounting even if it takes you a little bit longer. So just being transparent in that process. And then, of course, as Kelly mentioned, from the IHIP strategies, reach out to them. So we don't want to wait until they just think about it or go on and get some information from us, we want to make it clear that we're reaching out to you because we want you back. So for us at Jacksonville State, one thing we had going for us from the beginning is that we already have fairly affordable programs. We are a regional institution, so that's kind of what we're here to be more accessible to students. The development of the Finish What You Started scholarship was a good start to give them a little boost in that first semester, but we've also implemented partnership scholarships with some industry partners and chambers of commerce in our area. So a lot of our working adults in the area can access scholarships through their employer. We've talked a lot about personalized advising. That element is so important. They also have a personal admissions counselor through the readmission process. It's free to do the readmission application. We don't charge them a fee for that. And one thing that we're really proud of is that we've developed adult-specific communication plans in our CRM so that our adults aren't getting the same messages as the traditional students. They're not getting as much of the fluff and the football games as much as they are pregnant and parenting resources, adult learner success coach information, military and veterans office information, something that feels a little bit more like we're talking to them. And then, of course, we have our flexible degree program, Integrated Studies, that offers credit for prior learning, and we've leveraged that a lot. And the advising, as mentioned. So in terms of outreach, what we started with was a postcard that we sent to all the students that we identified in our system, starting at 90 hours earned, dropping down to 75, and then down to 60. We communicated with that group directly at that point in time when we first launched Finish What You Started. But we do now communicate with any of our stop out students that have been out for longer than 1 year. That's when they go inactive in our system, even if they were only here for 1 year. So they can still access the scholarship. We still communicate with them. We just don't count them in the same outcomes as our original outreach of those students that we identified. At level 3, the major challenge really, our student success team and our admissions team are super adaptable and flexible. So getting most of this off the ground wasn't too hard, but getting good contact information was probably the biggest challenge. We got a lot of bounce back emails, a lot of mail back postcards. And then, of course, a student that is highly interested in re-enrolling, ready to take that step, and they come back and find that they have some financial holds. That was the biggest challenge on the enrollment end. And Dr. Stone, the credit for prior learning, I'll let you take.
I'll talk about that in just a moment. Thank you, Kelly. The postcards, I think that it's important if you plan a program like this. Our postcards had a name and phone number to the advisor who would be working with that student. And I think it was really important that when the student contacted us in response to the postcard, they got that person. That is who worked with them. And so it was that personal touch that I think really made a difference for some of the students. And then I also believe that our ability to provide credit for prior learning also assisted. You heard Bonnie talk about that. And I will say that sometimes there are challenges there, even when you have processes in place. Like we have a portfolio that students will put together in order to receive credit for specific courses here. And in some students' cases, they would their work experience would match to, for example, nursing or education. And sometimes those professional programs are not willing to provide prior learning experience for certain courses. And so you need to be able to look for a workaround. And in our case, sometimes there were directed studies or special topics courses that we were able to use when certain programs felt like their accreditor would not allow them to award experiential learning credit through certain courses. So we worked around that, and as you could see, Bonnie benefited from it.
All right, and on the next slide, we have a snapshot of the outcomes of this outreach that we did for Finish What You Started. I really just want to point out the high graduation rate of the ones that actually did enroll. So we did have students that all they had to do was take one class. We do actually offer a free class every fall and spring. And so we've heard stories of students being able to take that elective course and graduate, or we simply just didn't have a graduation application on file. So this is really important and for us really encouraging because that is 168 students that now have a credential that can get them into the career that they're looking for. And more importantly, as Bonnie spoke to, for a lot of students, this is a very personal goal. And so we're glad to be able to help them accomplish that. And we do have 24 graduation applications out there now for this fall and this spring from this population. So we're very
And
excited.
I just have to add that this graduation rate, which is, you know, a compressed time period, is higher than our 8-year graduation rate. So, I mean, it's something definitely to be proud of. And we are going to move on to some questions. So to be honest with participants who are in this session, we can't see you. And so I am going to, or to see even whether anyone's out there. So I'm going to go over this first question. Kelly, if you could click so it will pop up. And what we'd like to do is take about 2 minutes for you to think about this and post in the chat. I've encouraged you to think about this throughout our presentation. But our example is just one program, and Bonnie's story highlights that program and some of the things that we did well. But we would really like to benefit from what you're doing at your institution. So if you would please share in the chat information about what you think your institution is doing particularly well to re-enroll adult students. So I'll give you just a couple of moments to think about it and type in an answer. We'll be calling some of those out. If you have a question about this, we can also do that. So if you would please take a few moments to post in the chat. Gonna give us one more minute. So if you're out there, please post something and then we'll move to the next question. Well, Kelly, can you make the next question appear? And so I guess we'll just click through these questions and then I have just a little bit more that I can add. But this next question, if you're just reflecting silently, is if you were the sole decision maker, what policy or practice would you remove or implement today to encourage re-enrollment? Kelly Martin, may I ask you, if you were the sole decision maker, do we still have a policy or a practice that you think we need to remove?
Yes. Definitely the on-ramp for the past due balances, because we have students that that do owe a balance, but if they were to re-enroll, they would be able to get federal aid for that semester. So it's not necessarily an indicator that they couldn't pay for their upcoming classes. So an on-ramp of some sort right now is my #1 goal, to get that on-ramp taken
And I
care
hope
of.
that happens. I met a former student recently in a business in town who wants to come back and tried to in the spring, but owes, I think she said $3,000, and she said, I can't do that. So yeah, if we could figure out how to help her come back to get her degree. Another question we have here is, who at your institution is on your re-enrollment dream team? And this is a really important question. As Kelly pointed out earlier, sometimes those teammates that you need, you might not realize until later in the process. So you want to think strategically, so that you have everyone at the table from the beginning, because oftentimes IT will have solutions that others won't think of, especially when you need certain kinds of data or tagging of students in the system. And then marketing is, of course, was very important on our team here. I will have to say that it is also very important, whatever kind of advising model is in place at your institution, you need an advisor. If someone else is doing certification, you need someone from the registrar's office, probably transfer office if you have that even separately. And then if there is an interdisciplinary, really flexible degree, and these other kind of degrees that are designed for adult learners, like the ones on our campus that Kelly listed earlier, you probably want to have someone from those programs at the table as well. Okay, we do have time for questions, but I also wanted, though, to quickly say that I think that the reason Finish What You Started even began at this institution and has been so successful is that part of it, I guess, might be the emphasis on recruitment and enrollment and growing our institution. So we have these kind of enrollment goals. But more so than that, from the top, we have an attitude about helping students and being student-centered. It's part of our mission, but I think it's really important that our current president, I've heard him say so many times, and like what he really thinks our institution is here to do is to help students. He says over and over again, we are in the business of changing families' lives. We need to help these students get that degree. And it's that kind of attitude that encourages and allows and supports the kinds of programs that Kelly and I just presented, Finish What You Started at Jack State, and the kinds of programs that Kelly Leon at IHEP are the kinds of programs that they are championing and supporting. So I'm going to stop there and see if there are any questions or any final comments from either of my co-presenters. Okay, and there's an evaluation attached to this session. If you would please fill that out. And I want to thank Katrina and all of you who are here for taking time and to be at this session. And good luck with your plans for recruiting, enrolling, and helping get these degrees into the hands of our post-traditional students. Thank you.
And if you would like to watch more films as a part of the College Completion Comeback series, log on to ihep.org/college completion comebacks. You'll find all 3 films there, as well as the viewing guide.
Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you to all of our speakers. We really appreciate all of that really awesome information and content. Like what was mentioned, there is a survey that is attached to this session, so please complete that. Thank you all for your participation, and have a great rest of your evening and a great rest of your conference.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.